Hi everyone, welcome to the Highlights from Ukraine podcast, your daily audio summary of the latest news reported in the Ukrainian media. My name is Artem, and here is the news. 991 days less the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The Washington Post informed that US President-elect Donald Trump held a phone conversation with Russian leader Vladimir Putin on 10th of November, reports Ukrainska Pravda. The newspaper's sources revealed that Trump and Putin discussed the war in Ukraine. This was their first phone call since Trump's election victory. One source shared that during the call, which Trump made from his resort in Florida, he advised the Russian leader against escalating the war in Ukraine and reminded him of Washington's significant military presence in Europe. Several sources said that Trump and Putin discussed the need for peace on Europe's continent, with Trump expressing an interest in further talks to discuss a swift resolution to the war in Ukraine. The newspaper noted, citing two sources, that the Ukrainian government was reportedly informed about the call with Putin and had no objections to it taking place. As reported, Ukrainian officials have long understood that Trump would engage with Putin regarding a diplomatic solution to the war in Ukraine. Despite that, official spokesman of the Foreign Ministry of Ukraine, Georgy Tikhy, denied that the Ukrainian side was informed in advance about this call. According to the Washington Post sources, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is said to be considering candidates to replace Ukraine's ambassador to the US, Oksana Markarova, after Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson called for her dismissal, following a visit Zelensky made to an ammunition factory in Pennsylvania in September. Jake Sullivan, the President Biden's national security advisor, assured that until the end of his presidential term, Joe Biden will advocate for the necessity of supporting Ukraine. Sullivan stated that the current US administration's approach in its final days remains the same as it's been for the last 2.5 years, which is to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position on the battlefield, so that it is ultimately in the strongest possible position at the negotiating table. Biden's advisor confirmed that the administration, up to the end of its term, intends to use all resources allocated by Congress for military support to Ukraine. Moreover, President Biden will have the opportunity over the next 70 days to make the case to Congress and to the incoming administration that the United States should not walk away from Ukraine, that walking away from Ukraine means more instability in Europe. Sullivan declined to specify whether a particular legislative proposal on funding is under discussion. At the same time, Jean-Noël Barrot, France's Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs, has expressed hope that US President-elect Donald Trump would not abandon his support for Ukraine despite his previous statements, reports European Pravda. In an interview with French newspaper La Parisienne, Barrot stressed that Trump is too wise to agree to what would be the largest territorial annexation in 75 years. Unquote. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk expects important statements on Ukraine by US President-elect Donald Trump soon, reports Suspilne. Tusk noted that Trump's plan for Ukraine, which had been partially disclosed by the media, was currently being prepared. He believes that statements on the ceasefire date, what borders would be upheld by it, and security guarantees for Ukraine can be expected shortly. Quote, "These will certainly be decisions involving less US interference in Ukrainian affairs," unquote, he added. Tusk emphasized that, quote, "Decisions on the war in Ukraine can neither be made over the heads of Ukrainians nor over ours," unquote. The UK government is also considering possible options in the context of Trump's approach to Ukraine, reports TSN. Chief Secretary of the Ministry of Finance of Great Britain Darren Jones said to Sky News that Britain will not abandon its obligations to support Ukraine. According to Jones, British government officials will be looking at and planning a lot of different scenarios of what they would do under any administration of the United States to make sure that Britain is in the strongest possible position. We would really appreciate if you could recommend us to your friends and family, as well as share information on social media. This way more people would learn about the podcast and truth about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The New York Times informs that 50,000 Russian and North Korean soldiers are preparing to launch a large-scale counteroffensive in Russia's Kursk Oblast, reports Ukrinform. According to US officials, Russian troops are carrying out missile strikes on Ukrainian positions in Kursk Oblast and deploying artillery against them. But they have not yet launched a large-scale offensive. Ukrainian officials said they expect a large-scale attack involving North Korean troops in the coming days. The New York Times reported that some US military and intelligence officials have become more pessimistic about Ukraine's overall prospects, noting that Russia is steadily gaining ground in both Kursk Oblast and eastern Ukraine. Officials say these setbacks are partly the result of Ukraine's failure to address the critical issue of a shortage of troops. One Western official said that Ukraine's surprise invasion of Kursk Oblast in August had weakened its forces across the battlefield in Ukraine's east, leaving Ukrainian troops vulnerable to a Russian offensive. But the official, as well as several US officials, said Ukraine still has strong defenses in Kursk Oblast and may be able to retain control over the area they currently hold, at least for a while. Western and Ukrainian officials said that the arrival of North Korean troops was a serious escalation after more than 2 years of war. North Korea has sent more than 10,000 soldiers to fight alongside Russian forces in Kursk Oblast. These troops are wearing Russian uniforms and have been equipped by Moscow, but are likely to be fighting in their own separate units. Ukrainian officials said that Moscow had supplied North Korean troops with machine guns, sniper rifles, anti-tank missiles, and rocket-propelled grenade launchers. According to US officials, Russia has trained the North Koreans in artillery fire, basic infantry tactics, and most importantly, trench clearing. This indicates that at least some of the North Korean forces will be engaged in frontal attacks on Ukrainian troops' dug-in defenses. A Ukrainian official said that North Korean troops were divided into two groups, an assault group and a support group, which would help secure the territory recaptured from Ukrainian side. Meanwhile, US officials believe that Ukrainian troops will be difficult to dislodge and that Russian and North Korean forces are likely to suffer heavy losses similar to those Russia has suffered in Ukraine's east. US and British military analysts estimate the current number of Russian troops killed and wounded at an average of more than 1,200 per day. The North Koreans will fight as light infantry without the use of armored vehicles, and the current Ukrainian tactics of artillery shelling and drone attacks have proven devastating for unprotected Russian troops. Nevertheless, if Russia gains momentum, it may not stop at its border but try to push Ukrainian troops even further. According to representatives of the US Department of Defense, it is unclear whether the North Korean government will authorize its troops to conduct long-term operations in Ukraine, or whether they are intended only for a counteroffensive in Kursk Oblast. Some US officials believe that North Korea may order its troops to stop at the border while Russian forces advance deeper into Ukraine. US defense officials also said they did not know whether North Korea would send additional reinforcements. According to a senior Ukrainian official, Ukrainian intelligence predicted that North Korea could send up to 100,000 troops. Thank you for listening to the Highlights from Ukraine podcast. We're a commercial initiative of just two people and we need your help to grow. Share information about the podcast, rate us in the app, subscribe to our Patreon. With your support, we're getting better. We call on you to demand from governments of your countries to impose the toughest sanctions possible on Russia and its citizens to stop their invasion of Ukraine.